Hello and welcome to Datum. This is episode 5 and season 3. Ravi, how are you doing?
Start that again. It's season 3, episode 5.
Doesn't matter.
It does.
Come on.
Does.
Okay, fine. All right. Hello and welcome to Datum Podcast. This is season 3, episode 5 of the... You're throwing me off. You're throwing me off. This always happens there. I always screw it up. Okay. Hello and welcome to the Datum Podcast. This is season 3, episode 4. Ravi, how are you doing?
It's episode 5.
God. All right.
Do you mean the intro?
I was so confident. Do you know why? Because I've written 4 in my notes. Let me write 5, then I won't get it wrong. Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome to the Datum Podcast. This is season 3, episode 5. Ravi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm well sheltered in my abode in Chelmsford today.
You bunkered up.
As I have been for the last 10 days. Given the current pandemic.
Absolutely. I'm going to have to change my audio
I think that's influenced today's topic. Okay, am I a bit too loud?
Yeah, you just shouted that down the microphone, but it's fine. It's fine. You seem to be in an office. Who's that behind you?
That's oh man, I've forgotten the guy's name. It's the guy from the US office.
Okay.
Stanley. It's Stanley from the US office.
Cool.
So we're actually live streaming this for the first time on YouTube.
Yeah.
We thought we'd try something different.
Mm-hmm.
So we're currently on Zoom, which is the platform that has got probably the shares have tripled in the last 2 weeks, at least.
Well, they haven't moved from 0, which is pretty good given everything's gone down. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. They've sort of stabilized.
Right.
But this is a virtual background, so I now look like I'm part of the cast of the US office. What's your background, Tim?
So my background is the Datum. It's over here. It's a virtual. It's a Datum logo, but the setup is not the conventional Zoom to YouTube setup. I'm actually streaming my screen and capturing the audio input from my desktop PC, and that's what you're seeing this from. Hence, it doesn't have sort of the Zoom flourishes, as it were. So it's a much cleaner setup, I think. But yeah, all good.
Cool.
I'm bunkered up at home. I've worked from home for like a year and a half, so I'm no stranger to this, which is great. I'm all set up already. But it's funny watching my girlfriend kind of, work from home for the first time in like her field of work, and it's every single time they get on a web call, they all basically do like a sound check for the first 3 minutes. It's hilarious.
That's cute. I think we'll talk about this a bit more, but we've been set up for remote work since day dot, right?
Right.
I think that's why we're so immune to it. Like half my weeks are normally spent working from home anyway, so it's not too different.
Right.
But let's recap the last episode. So last time we spoke, I was in Seattle. We had our first analog episode.
Absolutely.
With the hero that is Kent Martin. It was very spatial to have him on.
Hey.
I'm going to use that again. But it was a very good episode. I say very good. It was mainly because it was you and Kent for 3/4 of it, because I had to duck out.
Yeah. You introduced most of the technical issues with editing that podcast. I'm sorry if you listened to it early on, because there was some sort of feedback going on. But it was a really good episode. Kent shared a lot of sort of really interesting insights about his career and how he got to Tableau. I encourage everyone to have a listen again. I can't do it justice to say how good of an episode it was having him on.
Agreed. It was one of my favorites, actually. And I think what was really nice for me is it's one of the first one. Well, it is the first one that I've listened to, and I have no idea what happened next.
Right.
So it was a very fresh listen for me as well. So getting slammed at the end of the episode was good fun as well.
Good. There's also been a few updates out for Tableau 2020.1. The beta for 2020.2 just dropped. Tons of features. My word, we're going to be busy. So
well, you're going to be busy, because if you haven't checked it out already, you've got Tim's been hammering away on his YouTube channel for the last 3 or 4 months with some incredible videos and examples about the new features that not only just in 2019.4 but 2020.1, and I assume your weekend is going to be packed.
Yeah, I've got a different approach.
2020.2.
I've got a different approach. I'm trying to guess when it will actually come out, and then I'm working backwards from that to figure out a timeline. But there's a lot of really big changes, especially things like the data model. We just talked to some developers at Tableau in the last week or so, and even further than that, the whole product is just picking up pace in terms of development. So that's going to be really interesting as well. So yeah, look out for that. I think I have to start the videos much earlier than that because everyone's at home on YouTube and Netflix. And so, I think this weekend onwards, expect to see more on the channel.
I think that's going to be the same for everyone, right? And,
right.
And it's this really nice point for people who are doing online training or any pivot to video to start doing that. This is why, as we mentioned, Zoom is doing so well, as with other video conferencing platforms.
Right. I really thought that this might be the first time Zoom might go down, and actually, it's proved, at least as far as we're using it at the moment, been resilient, right?
But Discord went down.
Did go down.
Discord, for those of you who don't know, is a game. It was primarily used by gamers, but it's another collaborative platform.
Yeah,
and it's sort of niches live talk. Right?
Exactly. It's a place where gamers used to go on Skype, talk to each other, and then gamers got together and built Discord. But what it's got really going for it is this sort of real time talk. Really good audio quality, no friction whatsoever. You don't need to share a link or set up a meeting. You just literally hop into a room and just start talking, and that's it. Any device, anywhere, web or without web, on your device, just works. Really reliable, and it's free. That's the key thing. It's free. So there's a lot of flexibility there. So yeah,
and that's why it went down.
Well, they doubled the resources. They didn't sort of anticipate it because it kind of caught them off guard. So now everything's back up and it seems to be working very smoothly. So yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, today we're going to be focusing on remote working, which is obviously a very topical topic. Does that make sense? I hope so. Anyway, it's a very topical topic, and we wanted to talk about sort of some of the aspects that we've touched on in the past to do with ways of working, how it affects sort of analytics and the way we all work, things like cloud technology, how that all comes together to enable this, and then lastly, sort of the future of work and how that's going to evolve long term. So I think I'll sort of kick it off by maybe sort of just touching on the obviously context at the moment around COVID-19, coronavirus, which is the which one is it? COVID-19 is like the official one, but coronavirus is like the name of the family. Or
umbrella, it's like umbrella family, and this is like strain 19, and that's where it's come from. It's a sort of a weird spin-off of SARS in a way as well. I've not looked into the history of that or whatever, but it's been going on. I mean, if you look back, and the way that doctors are sort of realizing in the medical industries is it's been around almost since late autumn, right? The first cases that they're sort of tracking back to is late autumn, where they thought it was flu with different symptoms, which is where it is right now. But yeah, so COVID-19 has now been officially named a pandemic. I think most people or most companies now are recommending all people stay home. Supermarkets have, the Tesco that's very close to where I live, is a 24-hour Tesco. It's no longer 24 hours. So it's changed to being from 6 till 10 to help with stock turnover and things like this.
Right.
So a lot of things are changing in the world around us. But for the world of work, it's meant that many companies for the first time having to look at opportunities and strategies for remote working, where they might not have done beforehand, where possible, because of course there are some jobs such as lab work which cannot be done remotely. Yeah,
and things like finance industry where certain things have to be done on the floor, as it were, or if you take technology where certain work has to be done in secrecy and so therefore has to be physically in a particular place. And so I think what's really interesting is figuring out how companies do all of this. I can't count the number of times I've heard the word VPN in 1 week.
Tokens,
VPNs, streamings, webcams. Boy, I have so many webcams on my shelf. If I'd known, I'd have put them on eBay about a week ago.
It's a good time.
It's a very good time to sell that kind of stuff.
What is it like? Monitors, keyboards, and stands. They're rare commodity alongside hand sanitizers these days.
And loo roll. I don't understand the loo roll, but that's for another day.
For another story.
And so this is really sort of kicked things into focus. I think one of the key things has actually been the way in which organizations are working. So for the companies who have transitioned a lot of their sort of analytical infrastructure to the cloud, broadly speaking, have actually weathered this quite fine, right? So anyone who's running SaaS systems, you look at Salesforce, you look at elements of Tableau, those all work just fine. in the setup, because you don't physically need to be in a location. It's really when it comes to processes and systems that this all starts to fall down, right?
Exactly. I think you mentioned it there, but it's when things are within an intranet, which is where you need a VPN, or where systems are on what people call in a vacuum, effectively, where it doesn't have access to the internet, so you can't even set up or change something for people outside the network to actually get involved with these things. And whilst companies do what the fire drills for this sort of scenario, I don't think very few companies have thought of it at this scale. And if they have, they're like enterprise level, who have sort of have the infrastructure and like go time level to go. Whereas, medium-sized companies who are either very seasonal or very reliant on certain methods of working, they're the people who are finding it trickiest. Like Carphone Warehouse is a great example. If footfall falls, which it inevitably will, they've chosen to shut down all their stores, and lay so many people off, because in the short term, where they have small short-term targets, this doesn't work. However, things balance themselves out in different other industries.
And
as an economist, this is a fascinating time, right? So it's honestly, I wrote a tweet the other day about, this is pure A-level economics fodder, like a 25-mark question to explain the sort of processes that would happen with this sort of shock.
It's an interesting thing, because it's also in many ways, there's almost two sides to this. There's, can I keep my business functioning, and what elements of that business can keep functioning, right? Even if you've got stores shut, you still can't shut everything down, because the time it takes to wind everything back up will just exacerbate the issue whenever that is. And we're looking at weeks to months at the moment. So that's one thing. Then there is the organizations where their core business is process, like transport, for example, and logistics. Those things. Some of that can still happen, but most of it is just but
if borders are shutting now, right? So
exactly.
If you've got no goods coming in and out, and if you've got a economy which is just in time production, that's where the issues come in. And
exactly.
But in the world of analytics, I think, and tech, I think you're right. A lot of the folks that we work with, it might be simpler than other jobs. And if we focus in on that about remote working, maybe we can dig in a bit about like the sort of technology that's out there right now, and how things might change in the future. So we mentioned before that we've been set up for remote working from day zero. I think that's so where we work at the Information Lab, we've always had a culture of, we'd have an office. Right now we have an inverted commas office, which is basically the data school where you can perch. But effectively, we're set up for, as long as you've got an internet connection and your laptop with you, you can probably do your work client depending, right?
Yeah, that's harder than you think, right? An internet connection.
Agreed.
Everyone's at home streaming stuff, or working. Sorry.
Jump the shark there a bit.
Absolutely. And that's it's a weird thing. I mean, technically speaking, if you're fully cloud set up, well, you can just spin down some servers, right? And enjoy the benefits of not having to run all of that stuff unnecessarily. And the only person crying will be Amazon, but they'll be happy because they're selling loo roll instead.
Exactly. I mean, the on-premise server is the one that's at risk the most, right? So for example, people that have been set up for having racks and things like this, if they don't have external connectivity, they will need someone on the ground to manage the load in the VMs and things like this, especially where there's no remote but access. I mean, most IT teams now do have a method of VPNing in or remoting into a environment. But I think a lot of companies after this, sort of when we do move on eventually in about a year's time, a lot of meetings will be had about how do we stop this happening and what have we learned from this process. And I think cloud will be a more viable option as you sort of you have this innovative process where people share what they're doing. And it sort of makes it more viable.
And when it comes to things like the products, I mean, just yesterday, I think I was saying to someone that people picture Tableau as a piece of software that they install on their machine. They don't think of it as like a service cloud service, as it were, and they've just been acquired by probably the biggest, SaaS company in the world, right?
It's a website. It's like a website. Salesforce is just a website.
Exactly. And so that what's been interesting is, we've seen a few sort of challenges some customers are having when, employees have gone home, and what they've done is they've copied, data sources onto their stuff locally when they didn't need to. They just needed to have a VPN. And okay, it's slower, but that's going to be fine. What are the kind of challenges you see in that space? That sort of cultural education about the way these infrastructures work and how that actually helps towards business continuity.
A lot of this comes down to trust, right? I think trust is such an important facet of remote working. And, speaking to friends, and it's like, well, we've trialed remote working with this department before, and it didn't work because their productivity dropped through the floor, right? Mm-hmm. So you just end up saying you're never working from home again.
Yeah.
But eventually you're going to people have to adapt very quickly. I remember when I first, I had a customer who was working in Switzerland, and this is the first instance in my life that I'd had working from home. Mm-hmm. And it's tough. I think setting yourself that routine of not working long and also not procrastinating, that's quite difficult, because you think you can multitask, but when you need to knuckle down and get something done, you need that right environment and frame of mind, and having that routine is so important. I think in terms of infrastructure and the way people adapt culturally, I think you'll get a lot of other systems and checks and balances put in to make sure that someone isn't copying something onto a personal computer, right, even if it's faster. Yeah. I think what ends up happening is people go home and they've got their laptop, and then they've got their personal computer, and they're like, well, this computer is way better. I've got 2 screens. I'm just going to carry on working here and have this open to chat to people. Mm-hmm. When in reality, you shouldn't be doing that because of proprietary data and security and having the right controls in place.
Yeah.
But if you're able to do that, then that's the risk you take.
Exactly. And not to sort of, make this conversation too dry and talk too much about the sort of the back end logistics of remote working, but sort of to cap this bit off, I guess in terms of interesting, I don't think security has actually come up that much at all. I think
that's true.
People or companies seem to have locked that down, and I think that point you mentioned earlier about trust has actually maybe petered out. I haven't, by now I would have expected something to have come out about how someone copied something onto a USB drive by mistake because they needed to work from home. VPNs seem to be more reliable. However,
we're very early on, though. I think we're a lot of companies have only just decided to have the work from home policy this week.
I could be jumping the gun. Yeah.
I think we're speaking to customers today and yesterday. A lot of them have got the call Monday evening,
right,
to say everyone's working from home for the foreseeable,
right.
And
so
people, people are starting to pick up their laptops for the first time, and figure out. Again, talking to friends who are working from home for the first time,
right.
They're picking up their laptops and trying to figure out all their security systems and all this to start with. Yeah. I think next week or the week after, you might hear the stories pop out about people doing that security issue. Exactly. I think right now it's trying to figure out whether it'll work or not. That's where most companies are at.
Yeah. If we move the discussion on, I think the other interesting aspect is here that this is a brief glimpse into this dystopian future, right? Where everyone's wearing masks.
Utopian future.
Utopian, man. Wow. So, okay, fine. This is a brief glimpse into that utopian future, right? And, everyone, I went to Tesco today. Half the people were wearing masks. I'm in London, so there's obviously a high number of people wearing masks. Yeah. You go to shops, there's nothing on the shelf. People are literally hoarding anything they can get their hands on, and we're kind of living this future you've seen in this sci-fi films where everyone works from home.
That element I agree is dystopian. My utopian vision is the world of work.
Yeah. Utopian work, dystopian sort of
living,
right? And what I'm sort of really intrigued by is getting hands-on data about this next month. That transition from, not really being a remote working culture as a nation to having an instance where it's been enforced, and you get a month's worth of data to really analyze how that works.
So, I mean, I think that I want to only dig into that supermarket example a bit more because there's like, again, behavioral science wise, this is fascinating.
Yeah,
the way people are acting in this scenario is so interesting because as I tweeted this out yesterday. I went to Tesco to buy a few things, and all of the Tesco basics rice gone.
Yeah.
Uncle Ben's, however, fully stocked. So it's like Uncle Ben's is a brand, so it's like the branded items still there, but the cheaper stuff that people want to sort of hoard and take 2 or 3 items themselves. That's what they're taking.
Yeah.
So it's not at a point where people are thinking, "I need this." They're thinking, "I might need this, so I'm going to buy a lot of it."
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. I think the second thing I want to talk about there is the adaptation of the mindset people take when thinking of things like groceries.
Right.
Speaking to colleagues, they're like, well, usually I just stop by the Sainsbury's or Tesco or other shop on the way home to figure out what I want to eat tonight. And that's how it works. Rather than what I end up doing is I think about what I'm eating the next week or week and a half.
Yeah.
And then go shopping.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
So that weekly shop mindset, that's slowly starting to disappear with the way, the millennial workers who work longer hours or different hours than most traditional workers. And therefore the only time to figure out what they're eating is on their way home, because it's cheaper and, the flexibility of it.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? So much behavioral economics is going to be born from this next sort of a month or so. And I think for the first time, I've just been reading a book about misunderstanding economics. And the interesting thing is this time around, it's going to be heavily driven by data. I think economists hate the word research, right? That's what this book was saying, right?
Yep.
They hate surveys and research. So for once...
Because they don't trust people. We don't trust people.
Right.
People are irrational.
And so for once, you're actually going to have like a hardcore data set that you can actually use from a whole range of organizations and even just Google searches alone.
It's the first time that this sort of event has occurred and you have this much data, right? You've got real-time data, social media, you've got email, you've got text, you've got load put on the electrical servers, you've got, the money flows are so interesting, right? You're not spending money in the pub, but you're spending money on buying that new game because you're like, well, I'm home for the rest of the 2 weeks, so I'm going to finally buy FIFA.
Contactless is like a big thing now because no one wants to, literally have cash.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I saw someone mentioning like, "Oh, do I need to hoard cash?" I was like, "But why? Like PayPal,
exactly.
online,
yeah. And even cafes are reverting to cash, contactless only systems because it reduces the amount of sort of hand contact that you have. And so, if you're a card processor, just think how much additional data you're now getting when people's almost entire life is going through that system, right? And you can sort of track that journey. That's an interesting thing. The sad thing is, I don't think much of this data will be public, right? This is going to be, of course not. This is going to be the data that the likes of Google and AWS and Apple and those kind of people who aggregate at such a high level that they have that power to sort of really get an insight into.
I think the people that will actually get access to that data from these companies will be academics.
I'm not sure because it's such a key competitive advantage. I mean, we sort of call foul when China have, people on QR codes being tracked every single where they go. But then the exact same thing is happening, but just spread across 5 companies at the moment, right? Facebook.
And the government in the UK, they have no idea because technically speaking, that it's not data driven.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And so it's interesting. The exact same thing is going on, but here we are in a slightly different world where 6 companies get all that data and that kind of decides what goes on. So it's an interesting kind of
case study, use case, whatever you want to call it. Absolutely. It's just, but we're right now we're in the middle of it. Right. So we can't really think of it as this really cool thing yet because it's like, well, it's kind of crappy.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about work though. Let's talk about work. So the reason I said it's a utopian future we're looking at is because all of a sudden, companies that are so focused on meetings are now having hangouts where everyone's on or got their videos on and everyone's talking, and you've got the agenda that's pre-decided, and stuff that would have been blocked in for 2 hours, you now finished the conversation and got your answer in 15 minutes.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Like, if you think that the productivity is going to fall, I think what you're going to find is once people get into their rhythm of working from home and working remotely, that productivity is actually going to be increased significantly, because people find that with that, it's sort of like when I was in university, I had a eureka moment of how I best study. Which is I just lock myself down for a couple of hours at a time to get as much done as possible, and then I just, I like free time to do nothing. So that's my best way of working, and I know that that similarly in my world of work, I'm so heavily driven by my calendar, because I'll just block time out to do certain tasks. Otherwise, I'll just get distracted by supporting the rest of the company.
Exactly. But I think that's a natural sort of progression of sort of where all this is going. I think in many ways, if you sort of fast forward the way we were working today and sort of where things are going, this is why companies like Zoom exist, and WebEx and Citrix have been growing ever since they founded their companies, because we've slowly been heading in this direction. What's happening is an acceleration caused by like a global phenomenon, and the reason we're actually able to adapt to it very quickly is because the groundwork was already done. The concepts, the ways of working, people have been working from home for quite some time. It's nothing new there. The data, the infrastructure, if AWS didn't genuinely exist, that sort of whole concept of cloud computing didn't exist, we would really be stuck. We really would be stuck, because you couldn't just spin up resources on demand, and people like Discord couldn't just spin up additional servers. They'd be waiting 5 months to buy that server and get it all in, because
they aren't being produced anymore.
Right, exactly.
Because of this entire supply chain shock.
Exactly. And so if you've gone cloud, like the dream business in this situation is a web-only business that runs their entire infrastructure in AWS, relies on the AWS Amazon affiliate system to ship their stock, right? And everything is completely sort of not handled. All they do is manage accounting from Free Agent or something like that. Right. So all that happens right now is, you just spin down some servers, your stock sits in Amazon warehouses, and it just takes longer to you might have a few logistical issues with timings and stuff like that. That always happens in every business. But that is sort of the ideal business. And that is pretty much the measure of how resilient you are. If you take Netflix, for example, let's have a look at that model. The reason they're still running, in fact, they're going to do well, is because they're all on AWS.
So well.
Yeah. People are at home spending more time. They can, the model plays itself out. I don't need to explain it. If you take another example, let's take sort of email software and stuff like that, right? Well, people need to communicate. Again, it's all online. It's very simple. The process is entirely
you're going to get a lot more people trialing productivity apps like Slack, like Teams, like Yammer. Like Convo, and you're going to get a lot more of those trials. You're going to get people using GoToMeeting or Blue Jeans or Zoom. But I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think companies that have already started to consider these productivity tools and sort of trying to think about the future of work are a lot more agile and nimble in this scenario. It's companies that aren't set up for that are having to have their day of reckoning, where they need to figure out what they're doing. As you said, remote working is nothing new, but remote working at this scale is very new.
And the scale isn't actually the issue. It's the pace at which it's come, right?
Correct. It's just been like everyone at once. Straight off the bat. Like this week, the amount, like I said, the amount of home office supplies that have probably been purchased from Amazon, from Staples, from all these companies.
The sad thing is, a lot of it, I know, is going to end up in the tip as soon as we're all done with this. Like it's. I don't feel any sense of sort of finality to this. As soon as organizations can get back to the way of doing things, they're just going to go right back to it. No questions asked. And I think the only thing will change is that employees will start to realize, actually, I can do more of my job. There is a better
way of working. Exactly.
For some people, not everyone sort of has an environment where they can easily work from home. I think co-working space might become more popular again. They basically nearly died a death in the last few years. Look at WeWork. WeWork, and now, had they been around a few weeks longer, who knows? It could have been exactly opposite sort of scenario, right?
It's fascinating. Like I said, the future of work is really interesting, especially given that we kind of look at it. I think we're gonna get a lot more everyone's going to consider that working from home space.
Yeah.
When looking at like houses, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Like I was sending a link to my girlfriend about these garden offices. They're literally companies that come in and build a shed.
Yeah.
Build a shed in the back garden. And it's basically a 1-person, a 2-person, a small business setup. And you just turn your garden into like real estate, essentially. These are like mini flats.
And you've got the commute.
Yeah, the commute to your garden. Gosh, that's not a commute. But yeah, these are going to become sort of more common ideas. The one other place that I think is really fascinating is watching everyone scramble to figure out how to collaborate in an online space, right?
Right.
And I think we touched on this a little bit with meetings, but I mean, even before this call, I started this call with you half an hour ago because for the first time I had to figure out the logistics of how everything comes together, right?
Yes.
And I spent 20 minutes.
What was it? So the first time we had this idea was chatting yesterday.
Yep.
On a Google Hangout.
Yep.
Then we chatted today on Discord.
Yep.
About what we actually can do when we record this.
Mm-hmm.
Then we moved to WhatsApp.
Yep.
Because you got back from walking your dog and you're like, I'm setting this up now.
Yeah.
Then you sent me the Zoom link on WhatsApp to join.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we have the additional steps to get this on YouTube Live.
From Zoom, I added myself and another computer, which is what's streaming this at the moment. And it all goes on. And the interesting thing is that none of those were seamless. Right? I had to kind of hop between 100 things to get it to work. And I'm using some other bit of software. It's called OBS, Open Broadcast Streaming is the name of the software. It's open source, It's free. It pushes this to YouTube, and that's what's hosting this. Now, there is an ability to stream right from Zoom to YouTube, but that requires a paid account, blah, blah, blah. Could have done it in Discord, but didn't want the friction of everyone having to figure out Discord for the first time. And so that
could have done on Twitch, again, same principle.
Twitch, literally.
I think the thing about Twitch was we weren't sure how we'd record our audio.
Yeah, no. The issue with Twitch, I could actually push to Twitch, YouTube, anything, all on the same system I'm using now. The issue with Twitch is it penalizes you for not having had an audience for the first time, whereas YouTube is much easier. I can just set it up, stream. I'm on my channel,
and you've got a lot of subscribers,
right? And actually, streaming isn't available for everyone. I should say that YouTube limits streaming until you get to 1,000 subscribers, but I only have it because I used to have YouTube from way back when, so I got grandfathered into the policy rather than having it sort of natively. So that's why we're doing it here and not on the Datum Podcast YouTube channel. We actually do have one, by the way. So check that out. But yeah, this recording will go there, and then we can host it there. But
it's a good point on integrations, right? So the reason, I mean, this is such a key object of the stuff I do with customer success, which is why do people end up using Microsoft Teams or Yammer versus Slack? And it's because they have Outlook. It's because they have Office everything. So it's easier for them to try this new collaboration platform where you're trying to stop using emails, using Teams, not using, trying to bring in something external. And again, we come back to companies trusting. You're more likely to trust Microsoft than you are to trust Google or Slack, weirdly.
Exactly. And I mean, these things go down, and even if Google, does something, loses your trust, you're more likely to sort of look at the moving average of sort of trust, right? They've only screwed up once in the last 5 years, so I'll let them off. But someone who screws up again and again, like Slack, changed their logo, now they're changing their interface. It just causes this
added threading.
Yeah, exactly. It just causes this friction that people just start to get fatigued by, and then that ends up becoming sort of the narrative of your platform.
Facebook, right? Facebook for Work used to be a thing. I don't think that's
the exact same depth, right?
Yeah. I mean, Facebook for Work used to have that as a platform. A couple of companies I know use that. It just, whenever you say Facebook for Work, it just comes with a stigma, right?
Exactly.
Because what happens, you're more likely when you say Facebook and work, you're more likely to think about people who are using Facebook or work when they should be working.
Exactly. The other thing,
how do you see this shaking out then? Let's go on to the now. How do you see this shaking out in the long term world of work?
Well, I still think we're going to spend 2-3 months things figuring out. I think companies who run this kind of software for the first time are actually going to understand how these systems don't work for them, right? Because you build all these features with an idea of how they should be used. Even Zoom, it just recreated a bunch of stuff that we had in Citrix and Webinar. But real time transcriptions is something that we saw on Google the other day, right? And that was like mind breaking, right? Just having that and work and go to different languages, then suddenly people can talk in different languages to each other. That'd be amazing. So I think we're still in this sort of scientific phase where we're still just figuring out where the the creases are, how to iron those out. And I only think that 2-3 years down the line will you actually get valuable sort of feedback that actually pushes this forward.
Do you know what's going to be really funny? I think by the time they figure it out, this will blown over and everyone just goes back to work anyway.
Yeah, I think so. But I think every company will now have a risk mitigation policy, right?
Correct.
Called the viral risk mitigation policy or something, whereby if Corona happens again, it will literally be titled after COVID-19. Like, what's your COVID-19 strategy or something like that?
What's your COVID policy?
Yeah, exactly. And it will have sort of capabilities for things like this. People will have rolling contracts with Zoom just to be able to, go in. And actually, there's elements of this which can be taken into the office, especially in companies where office space is really, really, tight meeting space. It sounds weird, but I could see elements of remote working making it into the office seamlessly. The stuff like Slack and Teams is already there, but other aspects, like Zoom, for example, as the technology gets better, it's going to actually add elements of which you can augment this sort of interaction in a much better way.
Yeah, I mean, we're all of our data school consultants, all they're teaching is now on the browser. Right. I think you're going to see that disruption happen in education as well.
Right.
You're going to have more likely you can have Harvard professors doing MOOCs. MOOCs are a big thing about like
MOOCs.
When I was in uni, like 2012, 13,
right,
everyone was going on about like how MOOCs are going to change the world.
Massive online learning environments, right?
However, the second thing I think is going to happen is education is going to get disrupted in a way. Because right now you've got kids at home and their parents are trying to encourage them to learn independently. So you're almost going to get this always forced hand principle where the classroom sort of pivots into trying to give kids the love of learning. I think that's thing that's missing, right?
Yeah.
So the structured education system is great. It's worked for so long, but if you've given kids the opportunities to choose from these sets of resources what you want to learn and find out those curious points, and then you've got that. Then there's structured paths for you to follow from there.
Yeah.
I mean, think about like the way you learned HTML, for example. That was very much self-directed.
Yeah. I also I'd love to sort of, if I could, I'd love to go into Udemy and see, okay, what are people learning now? Because this is a really sort of big time of fear, unfortunately, for some organizations who can't keep their staff. This is very much a wake-up call to employees, right? And so I watched this guy called Ryan Cronenberg, I think, a cloud guru. He teaches AWS, and he started learning AWS. He was a lawyer, and he started learning AWS because suddenly there was no need for his services as a lawyer because of the immigration policy between Australia and the UK. Oh, the credit crunch caused this. Okay. And so he just went and learned technology infrastructure. He started with Microsoft, then ended up with Amazon. Right now, the exact same thing is going on, right? Some sort of global change.
Shock, yeah.
And I'd love if sort of Udemy had a list of, okay, what are people flooding to now? Like, what are the things? Are they all going into technology-based things? Are actually
into data science? Is Python still hot?
Like, or actually, are we too much in this? And actually, they're moving more towards things like the arts and the humanities. Things that can actually thrive in like a digital space. Because even internally, we've seen like the virtual yoga session. It's like the biggest turnout for that I've ever seen. Bigger than the actual yoga session itself.
Yeah, exactly.
40 people like signed up to a remote yoga session. It's like amazing. And so it's funny how
Peloton are about like they're about to clean up. Like the amount of times I've seen people say, I may as well just get Peloton because I can't go to spin.
Yeah.
It's like, Yeah, this is the exact use case.
Yeah,
Peloton was created itself for.
Yeah, and it's funny because you wouldn't have thought that would be the case in a world where you thought, people can't get out. You would never have said, gym classes are going to go down, or yoga instructors, are going to get more sort of interest. But actually, people kind of focus on their health. Yeah, people focus on themselves. They focus on their priorities, and actually realigns people's what do you call it? Priorities in a way, priorities and circumstances in a way that actually suits them. So,
agreed.
And that's kind of an interesting side effect.
This is the big thing. The amount of conversation I saw is like, well, we're all going to stay at home for the next few weeks. What are you reading? What are you going to learn? What are you going to do with your time? Like, are you just going to binge watch The West Wing like I am, or are you going to go off and build new content and learn new things? Right.
What are you doing? What are you doing in this time? What's your big thing?
Straight back in me, right? Yeah, I mean, I am binging. I've never watched The West Wing, so that is my current show that I'm watching in the evenings.
I tell you what, have you watched Westworld?
I've started watching Westworld.
Now that is a show. It's the final season as well. Just started now in the States. I think it's also in the UK at the same time. So yeah, I think it's week by week though. So I'm going to wait 10 weeks, then watch them all one go.
But more educationally, I bought a Kindle. I actually got it right here.
Going to read more. Cool.
Exactly. I mean, I bought a Kindle about a year ago, or got a Kindle about a year ago. And I've had books, and it's been great on travel. And like, so for example, I've done a lot of traveling in the last couple of months, and it's been amazing. It's been like, if I want to do something, I'll just read for a couple of hours. And it's actually, because it's lightweight and has many books on there, it's actually got me reading again.
Yeah.
But surrounded by screens from 8 o'clock till, I mean, last night was till 8:30 or 9ish, right?
Yeah.
Surrounded by screens for that long, and a Kindle is a lot lighter on the eyes, and I think it's also nice to sort of stay away from things like news. Beyond that, I think I'm learning a bit of Salesforce and going back to the mountain of Udemy courses I purchased. Yes. And sort of going through. I think currently I'm going through statistics because I realized
Udemy courses is the only other thing that I think I hold by alongside Lou-Roll. Like, because when there's a sale and you need to, you just look at the Python courses and you just think, well, if I ever need this, I might as well. It's only 10 quid or $10 or whatever it is in your.
It's $9.99.
Exactly. I did the same with AWS. I looked at the whole, A Cloud Guru library, and I just thought, you know what? At $10 a part, this is invaluable. Why wouldn't you buy this for yourself, right? So went and bought the whole lot. So I've actually, in response to your sort of what you're saying about what you're up to, I've actually got an exam. Oh, boring. So, I got an exam, AWS exam. I've been putting it off for a while, to be fair. I've been really busy, but like all exams, you just got to avoid putting them off and just basically do them, whether you like it or not. So I think that's in 2 weeks. Might actually get cancelled. Pearson VUE, who are holding the test, cancelled all the exams in the States. All the test centers are closed. UK ones are still open.
Can you not do remote? Is that not a remote exam you can do?
You can't do this one remote, unfortunately. They should make it remote because it's done in virtually the same conditions as a cloud practitioner, but that is remote. So, if you're thinking of getting into AWS, cloud practitioner exam is pretty much 30-40% of the way there to solution architect. Get on that. It's a really good course to sort of understand and do. So yeah, AWS in 2 weeks. See how it goes. I've got a lot of time now, so I'll try and make use of it.
Exactly. Excellent. Cool. Good. I think that's a pod.
Good. I'm looking at our streaming metrics here. I've got this lovely screen that tells me what's going on my iPad. I also pulled out one of these like streamer lights. That's why I've got like a nice glow coming from the table. Average watch time during this episode was 8 minutes 56. So I think this basically means there's one person who watched the entire thing. Because
everyone else has been dipping in
and out. Because we've had over the total, how many do we have? We've had 14 playbacks. So 14 individuals have watched this live with us. It was pretty cool.
Excellent.
We have three viewers currently. I think that's probably
of which one is me.
Yeah, exactly.
One is me.
And I don't think I count. Maybe the other one is me. And maybe the last one is Corey if he's still online. Corey dropped us a note in the comments there. I think he noticed your background.
It's a novelty background. It's very good.
Good.
Excellent.
Okay.
As we said, always love feedback on the pod. I mean, this is going to be one that you can actually watch on YouTube if you want to watch us back, including the first 15 minutes of Tim scrobbling.
Please don't do that. It's awful.
But thank you all for listening again. Feedback always welcome at Datum Pod on Twitter. You can also email us at datumpodcast@gmail.com. Sorry, at datumpodcast@gmail.com. But yeah, until next time, everyone take care, and we'll speak to you soon.